Is the Nvidia RTX 3090 actually possibly a good value? Well, a lot of people are going to say no way, but let's see if it possibly can be. Let's get started. Hey guys, Tiago with Classical Technology here. Remember to subscribe and smash that like button. They say that every time you do, an RTX 3090 gets a little bit cheaper and makes a little bit more sense. Alright, so subject for today's video, very simple. Is the RTX 3090 a good value when you consider everything that's gone around it in terms of pricing, availability, and everything that's been going on with cryptocurrency mining and GPUs for gamers? There's definitely a lot to unravel here. Now, when the 3090 was first announced at $1499 MSRP versus a $699 3080, people really did not like it at all. They thought that the value proposition was pretty terrible. The 3080 had pretty much the same level of performance for basically what is half the price. Now, of course, you can make arguments as why the 3090 for certain people will be worth that price premium. First of all, generally the cooler is better, like the Founders Edition 3090 cooler does seem to be a little bit better in terms of regular gaming, but in terms of the VRAM, that's definitely a major issue still, as we know that gets really overheated on most 3090s. And second, it does have 24 gigabytes of VRAM. That's going to be a considerable amount more than the 10 gigabyte or even the 12 gigabyte of VRAM that's available on the 3080 Ti. Now, this may not matter to most gamers, as I think 10 to 12 is mostly enough for most games that people will play, but if you're a content creator or using these GPUs as workstation GPUs, that's a tremendous amount of VRAM, and certainly it's going to be a tremendous value, so that's something that you definitely keep in mind, and that's why it kind of explains a lot of that price difference, as the GDDR6X VRAM is going to be considerably more expensive than a regular GDDR6 VRAM. So having 24 gigabytes of that versus 10, that's going to add a considerable amount to the price. So in terms of the performance for gaming, not much of a difference between the 3080, 3080 Ti and the 3090, at least negligible when you consider the big price delta that they had originally. Now, content creation, if you think you need 24 gigabytes of VRAM, of course, that's a tremendous difference, and that's going to be an easy use case for you to settle when you're thinking about which GPU to get. So in terms of the original MSRP of $1499, even sort of the beefier models that were like $1899 or almost $2,000, like an Asus Strix or like an EVGA for the 1.3, okay, definitely original MSRP versus a 3080, it's a terrible value proposition. But we're not dealing with original MSRPs anymore, and we never really dealt with them for the most part. So is a 3090, when you consider most of the pricing going around, a good value? Let me give you an example. A lot of 3080s and the 3080 Ti have crept up to over $2,000 on the secondhand market. Even some regular stores and dealers are selling them for tremendous markup because of all of the shortages, availability issues. So that means that the 3080 in some cases costs more than the 3090. Let me give you guys a concrete example. On the EVGA Q system, I was able to get a 3090 Kingpin for around $2,000. I look on eBay, of course it's selling for considerably more if you were to sell it or something like that, but a lot of 3080s and even 6900 XTs are basically that price or a little more. For example, some 6900 XTs, like at my local Micro Center, are priced at $2,700. Look at that value proposition. No way you won't tell me that a $2,000 Kingpin 3090 is not an amazing value compared to any 3080 and especially any 6900 that's the same price or sometimes even more expensive. So that's a concrete example of how warped the market is. You can't make direct comparisons. So what ended up happening is, yes, the 3090 secondhand prices did go up. In some cases, some of them went from $2,000 to $3,000 and even $3,500 for some of these Kingpin models or something like that. Some of these GPUs that are a little bit more niche, they certainly went up a very high amount, but I don't think the 3090 went up nearly as much for the most part compared to some of these 3080s and 3070s. If you take a $499 3070, a lot of them were selling for $1,300 to $1,400 at the peak in May. That's almost triple the price. You take a 3090 that was already around 18 or 1900, maybe it went up to like 25 or 2600, which certainly isn't as much of a price gap. Now, I think most people, if you took price out of the equation, would prefer the 3090. It has more VRAM than the 3080 or 3080 Ti. It generally does perform better in games, even if the margin really isn't that large. And of course, you have to remember that most of the new GPUs coming out now will have the Lite Hash rate limit, meaning that they're not going to be able to mine, or at least half of what they usually can. Even if you're not a miner, this could affect resale value in the future if mining comes back and if you want to sell your GPU. The 3090 is one of the GPUs that Nvidia has kept separate. They do not have any Lite Hash rate models for that GPU, possibly because it's already more expensive, a little bit more niche. So that GPU sort of stayed safe from all of these changes as well. Generally, it won't affect gaming performance, just mining performance of Ethereum and a few other things such as that. So what ended up happening on the real world market, the secondhand market, you end up seeing 3090s for pretty close in terms of pricing for the 3080 and the 3080 Ti. And in that case, I do feel that it makes the 3090 actually a pretty good value, because think about the advantages that I listed with more VRAM, not having a Lite Hash rate limit. All of these things really go in favor of the 3090, which is after all still the superior GPU. It wouldn't at original MSRP because at twice the price of a 3080, terrible value, I agree. But when the 3080 price on the secondhand market is within sort of a few $100s of a 3090, I think it turns the 3090 into a better value proposition. And I know some people don't want to hear value next to a 3090, which I know it's a very expensive GPU. Even if it's a little cheaper now than it was, maybe last month with sort of the prices going down, it's still a high-end cheap GPU. So I don't say value to mean budget or anything like that. I mean value in terms of what you're getting in the market for that particular product. If you spend $2,300 on a 3090, I think you're going to get a lot more for your money. It's going to be a better value than if you spent $2,100 on a 3080. That sort of $200 to $300 difference, you're getting just a lot more on the 3090. For most people, it may be worth it with a little bit better frames per second. For a content creator, definitely with 24 gigabytes of VRAM. Just in general, that's where I feel like you're going to find the value. Of course, value and well priced are pretty much all out the window with all of the MSRP bumps. You would have to look at original MSRPs to see what really is a good value, like a $499 3070 or a $699 3080. Then we're in agreement. Best value you could have gotten last year. But in terms of where we are now, you have to extract the value of what something has in the market. Even if the price is high, like the 3090, like I said, expensive GPU, you have to view it in perspective with the pricing of all other inferior GPUs that are getting pretty close to the price of the 3090. Now, this may change once again in the future if prices do continue to drop and the 3080 and the 3080 Ti return to sort of what are original levels, or at least considerably cheaper, and the gap widens between the 3090, then I think for most people the 3090 will go back to what it originally was, and not a very good value for your money, because if the price gap and delta really are much wider, then certainly it is not worth it. But if that price gap stays pretty close like it is now, so if your budget is to spend that much on a GPU anyway, take a look at the 3090 versus everything around it in the market, and I think you will agree for what you're getting, it certainly is now a value that sort of is a lot better than it was before. But keep in mind, this is very organic. Just like it didn't start off that great, it can certainly quickly turn that way as well if all of the events and everything else start to change very quickly. All right, guys, let me know down below if you agree or disagree with me. Let me know what you think. Remember to smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.